Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the time for this interview. Because you are yeah, you are a really fascinating blend of skills and specialities. Because you are a cardiologist, and you are an author of the book called Just One Heart. And you blend various different sort of strands of wellness and well-being
Mm.
together. Um, and you've had, an incredibly interesting sort of personal journey as well. So, um, how about the question, what is joy to you, Jonathan?
Joe, what a pleasure and what a gift to be able to chat with you about this subject that for me is so crucial. It's so vital. As a heart doctor, I often know joy by its absence.
Ah,
I
yes,
know joy
yes.
by its absence, and I know it from my own experience, many years having experienced loneliness and grief and depression and certainly lack of joy. And I
Yeah,
also know joy by memory. I know it from my childhood, and I know it from moments of my earlier years, usually involving someone else, usually involving a connection with something more than me and my own mundane concerns,
yeah,
usually in nature, uh,
yeah,
often without the pressures of performance, without the pressures of appearance. And so I know joy also in my work when I am feeling like I'm doing something meaningful, which is fortunately part of the job of being a doctor. If we stop to appreciate it, every moment of every interaction, whether or not it's life and death, whether or not it's hearts stopping and restarting, there is a potential to appreciate joy because we're experiencing life in its most vulnerable,
yeah,
often rawest essence. So for me, joy is about connection, it's
yeah,
about transcendence,
yeah,
it's a sustained way of being. It's not a fleeting fancy like a moment of happiness. It's an approach
yes,
to life despite
yes.
despite the hard challenges that we all face.
Yes. Um, um, uh, well, it kind of sort of naturally sort of follows on from what you're saying. But so therefore, how important is joy to you?
Mm. It's a great question. It reminds me of my mother. My mother, I
Oh,
would say, my mother who passed about 10 years ago, I would say she was a very powerful, wise, thoughtful person who raised seven children to go out and to serve and do good in the world. And
amazing.
and as you're asking me the question, I think, how would my mother have answered it? And I can tell you, my mother once said to me that happiness is overrated. Happiness is overrated.
Yeah,
And for
yeah,
me, it's important to distinguish between happiness and joy. And she was
very
a
nice.
product, a child of the Great Depression, like my father as well. And there
Yeah,
weren't a lot of moments of joy there. So to answer your question, how important is joy? It's vitally important as an antidote to the chaos that we experience, to the heaviness of stress that's all around us, to the
yeah,
conflict. It's a necessary antidote, and it's also a vaccine. It's also a vaccine in that it can help buffer our spirits against what's to come in the future that we haven't yet experienced. And then, of course, from my own lens as a heart doctor, joy protects the heart and joy heals the heart in all of its forms for a variety of fascinating reasons.
that is amazing. Um, um, see, when I was reading your book, which I absolutely recommend. I'm really enjoying it. Um,
I'm so happy.
um,
Thank you.
it's such a lovely blend of um, the physical and the emotional and the
Mm.
social and the spiritual, and I mean these all seem to be absolutely at the heart of what you would describe as joyful living. Um, um, uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you named four dimensions. The heart has four chambers. And though I initially was trained to be a heart doctor who focused on the physical heart, the
Yep.
electricity and the pumping action and the pressures, I realized that so much was missing in the way that I was approaching my patients. And then I stepped back and looked at our healthcare system and how we even
Yep.
view health in modern times and how narrow our focus is. And I realized that when we speak about the heart, and I've spoken about the heart for 25 years now,
Yep.
and I listen to people not just from healthcare, but from music and from art and philosophy, there are these four dimensions that people are really speaking about. There's the physical, there's also the
Yep.
emotional heart, that feeling that emanates from the
Yep.
core. And then there's, as you alluded to, the social heart. The source of love is thought to be the heart
Yep.
for thousands of years. And then ultimately it's the spiritual heart, that connection with a sense of meaning in our lives. It's what our heart's called to do and called to connect with.
Yes.
So for me, it's a very helpful lens to understand the crisis of our time and also point us towards the prescription for healing.
Which kind of begs the third question, which is
Mm.
kind of since you mentioned sort of prescription for healing and for self-healing, what's your top tip, or what are your top tips for accessing, if you like, a joyful living?
Mm. Well, when I think about that question, I think back to myself at the time when
Yep.
I would have asked that question with desperation 15 years ago. Can I be happy again? And when I
Yep.
was at my lowest point of burning out and real depression and feeling quite alone. And so my first top tip is recognizing that we're not all in the same place of this spectrum of grave sadness to absolute well-being and bliss. And so I'm sensitive to the fact that people come to these conversations from many positions on the spectrum. My first tip is to simply recognize where you might be without judging that fact.
Very nice.
And
Yes.
it's so often that, people who are joyful, yeah, they tend to be students of joy. Like you and like me, the more we study joy and its sources and its and the forces that push against it, the better we get at finding it. And yet
Yep.
it also can be quite elusive if we're chasing too hard. So the first tip is to notice where you are, to accept
Yep.
where you are, and to not begin some desperate chase for joy, but simply to be where you are.
Yes. 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 Um, I think isn't it Jung who makes a statement that's, along those lines, that the apparent paradox is when we accept where we are, that's when we are in the best position to be able to change.
Exactly. That was Carl Rogers.
Okay, yes,
Just
yep, yep,
after that. Yeah,
yep,
exactly. And it's exactly the concept. It's just a paradox, isn't it?
yes,
I often find patients and colleagues who are desperate for change in their lives, and I've been desperate in myself. And the paradoxical answer is stop chasing whatever it is you're chasing. Just pause, and
yes,
allow the resistance that's there to ease, because so much of the stress and the obstacles to joy come in the fighting and the desperation to get away from its opposite rather than being with the suffering. So I know this is not what you asked, but when you ask about joy, I have to speak about suffering.
oh yes, yes. Yes. I mean, they are a coin, are they not?
Yeah.
And the coin really is feeling, isn't it? Feeling and being aware. Um,
Yeah.
um,
Yes,
so
exactly. And not to
yes,
leave things in the low state. Once we've practiced our acceptance, once we've learned to work with life's inevitable challenges, either with reframing thoughts in our mind or adopting a certain attitude or a mindset about life or about other people, working through our own wounds, then we can get into the exciting work of cultivating joy. And
yes,
cultivating joy can be the work of a lifetime. Um,
yes,
and I think about it as there are external forces which can
yep,
support our joy, and there are many internal forces. And I think we have to work with both of them.
yes,
External forces are look at the world right now. There are sources of sadness, there are sources of
yep,
conflict and
yep,
strife. And so How are we relating to them? How much are we letting them into our lives and to impact us? And how much are we recognizing that we can't control some of that? So let's let that
Yep.
be and be
Yep.
responsible for our own internal sources of joy, which often come from these states of flow, these states of
Yes.
uh, these states where we're pursuing a meaningful goal or something that's challenging to us, and slowing down enough to
Yes.
savor those moments rather than doing what we are so often doing, which is to rush through our lives. You can't rush joy.
Now that's another nice phrase. Another nice. I mean, I mean, there are all kinds of really sort of, interesting things that you said, and I love, for example, joy being sort of both a vaccine, right?
Mm,
And a kind of and a buffer. So it sort of it has this effect and this effect.
yes.
Um, and then accepting what is
Mm,
as the basis for for kind of sort of healthily and holistically sort of moving forwards and taking the time to slow down, because I love the
mm,
story in your book about when you went to Scotland
mm.
and your wife said, "No, get out of there." Look, and you then, when you slowed down and stopped and got out of the car, then you saw the double rainbow, right?
Yes.
But it's very easy to miss these things unless we take the time to pause and stop and be aware and look around. Um,
Yeah.
um, um, well, fantastic, fantastic. Um, um, uh, well, it has, of course, been amazing this conversation, and thank you so much for taking the time
Mm,
for it.
mm.
And I'm going to continue continue enjoying Just One Heart,
Oh,
I'm really enjoying it sort of, so much. Um, um, and Jonathan, thank you very, very much for taking the
oh,
time for sharing your insights and your experience of joy,
mm,
Jonathan.
mm. I'm feeling the joy amplified with you, Joe. Your laughter, your smile, your presence. You are one of what I would call the forces for joy that are helping so many of us in times of stress. So thank you, and keep doing your wonderful, heartful work.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. Mm.